Hello again for our regular Zoom sessions. We are very fortunate at this point to have Julie Johnston here to talk to us. And as you know, we have all been talking about the difficulty of educating people to actually understand that they are part of the planet, that they live with the rest of the planet and the other species. And we've always worried about how on earth can we get them convinced that they actually should consider others in the planet they live in. Julie is working in this field now. She has been for some time. She deals with how you actually get education to people in a form that they understand that they really must take care of the environment that they live and survive within. Now, Julie is, you told me before that you lived on Pender Island in the Gulf Islands. It's a lovely little place. And it's very, one of the nice things about it is you can see all the environment, all the key factors near you. You know you are part of the environment. That is very hard for other people to understand, particularly in some urban settings. So Julie is going to tell us about how she is helping to change how education is provided to people who need to know. So thank you again, Julie. Over to you.
Thank you for having me, Ted, and welcome everybody. So I just wanted to point out a few things about my background. First of all, I have a master's in adult education that focused on sustainable development learning. And I remember my mother saying to me, "Oh, sure, you had to get a master's that sounded like a disease, mad ed." So that humbled me. And I want you to know that I'm very humble about that degree. I also am a Climate Emergency Institute associate and a climate reality leader. I trained with Al Gore in San Francisco many moons ago now. And aside from GreenHeart Education, I've also had several other contract employments, Upper Canada College, Royal Roads University, things like that, along with several years teaching a wonderful program. You'll see some pictures along the way of my students on Pender Island. And we were a program, an alternative program called Spring Leaves Family Learning. It was quite wonderful. And let's get right into it. So this was the quote that got me going, and it's by David Orr at Oberlin College, and he says, "All education is environmental education. By what is included or excluded, we teach students that they are a part of or apart from the natural world." And as you can imagine, that got me thinking about, so what does our school system do? It teaches students that they are apart from the natural world. So you probably know that most children can now recognize hundreds and hundreds of corporate logos, but no fewer than 10 plants native to their region. And to me, that's a crime. It's an insanity. It's an evil that we would raise children to be so inculcated in the destructive economy and so ignorant of their neighbors of all different species. Then the other thing that happened for me was the threat of nuclear war raising its ugly head again. And I'm not the only person who's used the term mutually assured survival, but I'm trying to help people see that between war and conflict and the threats raised there and the horrid looming threat of complete climate collapse, we need to be working for mutually assured survival as opposed to mutually assured destruction, which is the path that we're on right now. So green-hearted teaching to me is teaching in service to all life. And it means teaching in a way that helps our students create their best possible future as part of the web of life on this precious planet. I mean, it's precious. It doesn't matter if there's life anywhere else in the universe. This planet is precious. So I just want to break this down a little bit more. Green-hearted teaching is teaching in service to all life, not just the economy. Because right now it really seems like when people say to teachers, well, what's the purpose of education? Oh, well, it's so a child can, grow up and get a job and become part of the economy. And like we don't think about what that means. But green-hearted teaching means teaching in a way that helps our students create their best possible future from what they're being bequeathed by our generations. So it's our generation that has to start asking, like, we're teaching reading and writing and math and all the other things we teach in school, but in service to what and to whom? If we don't consciously choose to educate for development that is sustainable, then we are by default educating for unsustainability. It's that simple, because the path that we are on is an unsustainable path. So if we aren't consciously making the effort to teach in different ways and to teach different things, then we are by default educating for unsustainability. So the big question that I want to talk to you about today is, how can we already know the why, the climate crisis, sixth mass extinction, the threat of nuclear and war and genocide around the world. So we know why we must green the heart of education, but I want to talk to you today about how we can do that. So greening the heart of our teaching means implementing education for sustainability in deeply transformative ways. And that, I believe, is something that can be accomplished through a simple yet profound kind of just shift in our educational focus. So the first thing I want to say is that I'm not asking teachers to just like throw out everything that they do. I just want them to kind of go and shift their focus. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So I also pose the question when I make this presentation to actual teachers, I say, well, how might our work as educators be different if a sustainable future, and indeed what the IPCC calls a livable future, for all young people, is its purpose? How would our life work change? So how can we connect our schools and our classrooms? That's one aspect. Our school communities, that's the second aspect, but especially our curricula. So the what are we teaching? With the rest of nature. How can we connect what we do in our schools with the rest of nature in ways that will green the hearts of our students? And so I'm going to talk about a few other things, but then I'm going to take you to a green curriculum map, and we'll journey through that together. I believe it's a simple yet urgent transformation that will allow us to show students, the courage, the compassion that they need. Like, we have to be brave as educators and as community members who are supporting this work. We have to be brave and we have to be compassionate, because that's what they need from us in the face of all the emergencies that their generation is facing. So we'll start out with classrooms, but this is just the triple Venn diagram. Well, here it is when we're talking about greening our school system. So we can green our facilities and operations. What I found, I'll just let you know, is that that's the first one and the easiest one, because they can save money. School systems can save money by, creating less garbage, for example, in their cafeteria, because then they don't have to spend as much to have the garbage carted away. So that's the easiest. Organizational behavior and attitudes, that's where they can work. They can do all sorts of fun things with the community. The toughest one, and it's the one I'm going to leave for last, is curriculum and professional development around curriculum. So take a deep breath. Think about how you were all children once, I think. And we'll carry on. So let's talk first about greening school facilities. And I love this quote from Anton Chekhov. Sometimes it makes me cry, this quote. In nature, I'm just going to wait a second till someone mutes. In nature, a repulsive caterpillar turns into a lovely butterfly. But with human beings, it's the other way around. A lovely butterfly turns into a repulsive caterpillar. And you think about how wonderful young children are. And then, okay, well, let's have a look. So what is the metaphor that we want? What's the reality that we want to create? Do we want schools as prisons? And I want you to think just for a moment in your heads, like, how did your school connect you with the rest of nature? Okay, so do we want to create schools that are like prisons? Because don't forget, prisons and factories And schools were all invented kind of at the same time, you know, the Industrial Revolution. Or do we want schools as wastelands? Or do we want schools as fertile gardens? That's the garden that my class and I created at Pender Island School in British Columbia. So greening our schoolyards means having school gardens. We built a greenhouse, we planted some fruit trees, we have rainwater barrels there, a composting program. We also created an outdoor classroom. Teachers have to be able to take their students outside without the principal sort of going, tisk, tisk, you're wasting valuable educational time. No, being inside all the time is wasting valuable education time. So taking kids outside, and let me show you. Oh, where did I put it? I had a photo for you of my, maybe it's later on. But we can also green our classrooms. So do we want, do we want classrooms that disconnect students from the natural world? Or do we want classrooms that connect them? Like simple things, like the plants in the windows, very simple things. And we can also blur the lines by taking our classes outdoors more often. So these are my students, just kind of an afternoon at the ocean, you know, at the beach, lots of adults there for the safety aspects. The bottom left, I wanted to let you know, we grew wheat. The very first time I got together with this alternative group of students, I said, what do you want to learn this year? And one of the boys shouted out, pizza. And then everyone else said, yeah, I love pizza. I like pizza. And so we created a pizza garden. And this is us cutting the wheat after it grew. And the students are cutting it with little kindergarten scissors. And we felt like the little red hen, you know, creating pizza from scratch. There's our outdoor classroom. I knew I had a picture for you. So the students designed that outdoor classroom. It's got a pizza oven on the left. It's got shade for taking students outside. I used to do some nature day camps on Pender Island. And so the kids would always just kind of sit themselves in the shade, whatever time of day it was. And then the little cob building there that you can see was for garden equipment. And next, I want to move you on to greening school community behavior. But this one can be really fun because it doesn't take a lot to do the things that I'm going to suggest. But look at how many school community stakeholders there are. You know, the students, for starters, teachers and assistants, parents, the administration, your support staff, like custodians and secretarial, maintenance and ground crews, facilities and operations people, purchasing and suppliers, finance. So whether that's at the board level, the school level, or the parent advisory council or PTA level. And then the neighbors and the actual community that the school exists within. There's also simple things like using safer greening products, using sustainable paper products while cutting down on their use in both situations. Idle-free schools. I remember when I got my job at Upper Canada College, one of the questions was, so many of our students are picked up by parents who sit right in front of the school with their engines running. And they said, what would you do about that? And my response was, can you say car blankets? Because they're running their engines because they get cold in the winter in Ontario, waiting for their kids to come out of the school. So a fundraiser became car blankets with the school logo and a big green school, idle free school campaign. So this was Adams. We had a little green school club, and the kids learned that the neurotoxins from car exhaust affect learning. They affect the brain. The same with going pesticide free and teaching kids that dandelions aren't evil, you know, versus the things that you have to spray on a field to not have a single weed in it. I think that green schools need to be promoting and teaching about zero carbon, non-combustion, perpetual energy. The burning age has to end, right? And kids aren't going to learn that unless we teach it. Green schools also encourage sustainable transportation. They practice the 3 R's. I am shocked. I still hear from schools in the United States, for example, who still don't have recycling in their schools. But we also need to teach a lot of other, that should have been maybe 23 R's, rethinking, refusing, repairing, and there's so many other R's that kids could learn about. Here's another one. Green schools should be serving healthy vegan meals because no one ever died from not eating meat in a school cafeteria at lunchtime. But these are pictures of actual school lunches in the United States. Now, how can you expect kids to learn in the afternoon after feeding them this junk? I see an orange, but otherwise there's actually nothing that's very healthy in any of these pictures. Versus, these sorts of school lunches. So better personal health right away equals better planetary health, but it's also a jumping off place to talk about better planetary health and how the sort of industrialized livestock industry is so bad for the planet, things like that. Now, here's a whole list of different things that schools can do to, to bring their school community on board, like the walking school bus, where two parents, instead of, all the parents driving their kids to school, there are two parents, one at the beginning of the line and one at the end, and they collect kids as they walk to school. Vegan hot dog days, instead of whatever that stuff is in a hot dog that they normally serve. And some of you, if you're not in Canada, I don't know if I need to explain hot dog days, but it's just a fun thing that the parents groups will do with the students, often on their fun track and field day or something like that. But yeah, hot dogs are carcinogenic. Like, why are we feeding those to our students? The idle-free zones, as I mentioned, plants in every classroom. I had a school principal say to me, well, what if the plants die? I said, well, that's the circle of life. So then that becomes a teachable moment. Litterless lunches, teaching families to send lunches to school in reusable lunch boxes without all the cartons and the little packages. I mean, just don't get me going on that one. The amount of garbage that a school can create just because kids are bringing garbage from home. They should be taking it back home after the school day ends. But using daylight more often, wearing sweaters, turning computers off at night and on weekends, practicing gratitude. When we kind of got religion out of the schools, we also got gratitude out of the schools. And there's no reason why we can't practice gratitude. If we're having a school meal together, there's no reason why we can't say thank you to, all the different people involved, the animals that might be involved, the land that gave us the food, things like that. Sheltered bike racks, making recycling easy for kids, etc. So take another deep breath as we move on to curriculum. So how can we connect our classrooms and our school communities? I just gave you some ideas, but especially our curricula with the rest of nature in ways that will green the hearts of our students. So many of you will know Rachel Carson. I've changed the gender language here, but it's a very famous quote of hers. If children are to keep alive their inborn sense of wonder, they need the companionship of at least one adult who can share it, who can share that sense of wonder, rediscovering with them the joy, excitement, and mystery of the world we live in. And that one adult can be the teacher. So pointing out genuine, authentic connections between the existing curriculum and education for sustainability or climate change education is going to take, and I already mentioned, compassion and courage, but also curiosity and independent thinking on our part as educators, but also rich group thinking, like amongst everyone else who's involved, like the parents, our colleagues, administrators, the students themselves, and other school community members. So when we talk about integration, we're integrating all aspects of the education system, not just like math and reading or social studies with science. No, we're integrating who comes together to talk about all these things as well. So I mentioned that it's time for a shift in focus. So it's a simple yet urgent transformation, and it's going to allow us to show students courage, compassion, curiosity that they need from us. Here we go. Let me walk you through this. So here's the Green School curriculum model. and I'll say right away that I'll give you an example. The BC, British Columbia in Canada, Ministry of Education created a curriculum framework on environmental learning. Now, a curriculum framework just means that the teachers don't have to teach it. It's just a little play on words. It means, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. You don't have to teach it if you don't have time. So A, that's bad enough, right? This stuff should be being taught. It should be in the curriculum. But they had all sorts of things for every age level to teach the kids. And what I say is, we need one big idea for each developmental level. Okay, let me walk you through. So the younger kids, what we call in Canada, primary students, the big idea for that developmental level. So the only thing that the teachers have to hold on to is nature connecting, is nature bonding. Okay, and we're going to walk through all of these things. Then when the students hit grades 4 to 5 or 6, so they're 10 to maybe 12 years old, we're going to teach them ecological principles. They have to know how life works. Then when students hit that magical age where they would rather be standing around at recess talking to each other than playing around out on the schoolyard or on the, the monkey bars or something, that's the age where students could be focusing on environmental solutions. So it doesn't matter what you teach. If you're teaching that age level, you're looking for ways to focus on that big idea of solutions. And then the senior students can be focusing on sustainable development. Okay, let me walk you through. So the foundation for this green school curriculum model is compassion and respect and the ethics of sustainability. So everything else that we do is based on a strong foundation of caring and concern and respect and ethics. Then the umbrella, we now know, for everything that we do in the education system needs to be the fact that we are heading for extinction, that we are in a global climate and oceans emergency, we are in a biodiversity crisis. Okay? That has to be, like, everything we do in the education system has to be underneath that umbrella. And I'm not saying that that is taught at every age because it's not developmentally appropriate for every age, but that all the educators need to understand. Like when I talked about teaching in service to the earth, to the rest of nature, this is what I mean. Like, we just have to keep this grand, horrible emergency in mind with everything that we do. So I don't know if you remember Rajendra Pachauri. He was a former chair of the IPCC, and he said many years ago, we are risking the ability of the human race to survive. And then more recently, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said climate change is an existential threat to most life on the planet, including and especially humankind. So this umbrella is serious. Then the backdrop, if you can picture what's sort of in the backdrop of everything that we're going to be doing, is environmental and ecosystem health. So what this means is that at no time is our school going to throw poisons down the drain, for example. At no time are we going to make the school environment toxic for the children and for the rest of nature around the school. So then we have those things. We have a foundation, we have an umbrella, we have a backdrop. Excuse me. And then we walk through the different curriculum areas. So as I mentioned, the preschool and primary grades, it's all about nature connecting and nature bonding. So research shows that healing our culture's disconnection and alienation from the rest of nature is a vital step. So if we're raising kids that are always sitting around a room like this, here's a fake plant, but at least there's something green. If we're always surrounding kids with this, then they can't learn to bond with and to love the rest of nature. So Richard Louv, the author of Last Child in the Woods, quite famous book, he said the children in nature movement is fueled by this fundamental idea. The child in nature is an endangered species, and the health of children and the health of the earth are inseparable. So reconnection to the natural world is fundamental to human health, to well-being, to spirit, and to survival. So Richard Louv understood how big the threat is. So I have a no-brainer for each of these different developmental levels. Contact with nature is as important to children as good nutrition and adequate sleep. So anyone who's had a child who can't sleep at night, you know that they cannot function well the next day. You know that children who don't eat well don't function well. But it turns out that without that connection with the natural world, with the rest of nature, those kids aren't functioning at peak either. Some research shows that time spent outdoors correlates with increased physical activity. That makes sense. And fitness in children, so therefore their health. Exposure to green spaces reduces crime. It increases individuals' well-being and their ability to focus in school. You know, if you let them out into a paved, little area for their recess, they're not going to come back in ready to focus. If they haven't kind of been breathing the fresh air and come back in ready to work. Some of you will have read that people recuperating in a hospital room where they have a view of trees will heal faster than people who just have a view of other buildings out the window. Outdoor activities in natural settings can significantly reduce symptoms of ADHD. And that's particularly important these days because so many more students are coming to school with symptoms of ADHD. And it's my fear is that it's because as children, they did not play outside. They just, most of us were probably free range kids and off we went. And we came home when our moms called us for dinner or something. The other thing is that outdoor education with a focus on environmental learning increases academic achievement. There was a huge study in the United States on environment as integrating context for learning. And they showed that learning outside, if the kids are focused on environmental education, their academic achievement in reading, writing, math, social studies, and behavior all increased. And the results of my Mad Ed research was that our culture's disconnection and resulting alienation from the rest of nature is a root cause of our environmental problems. And it just makes sense. I mean, the environmental problems started when all of a sudden we came off the farms and went into factories. So we were disconnected from the natural world. And we had to stick kids in, these ugly schools because we were in factories. They couldn't be out in the fields with us anymore. I believe that educators can honor the importance of time spent in nature throughout the grades, not just with the primary kids, but there can be an outdoor classroom. They can bring nature into the classroom. They can do field studies. They can study natural history, which was all the rage during Victorian England, right? We can go back to helping kids become experts in seashells or something. The kids especially the kids who love dinosaurs, who know the name of every dinosaur, those kids could be learning about shells and ferns and mosses and all sorts of things. And nature journaling. Oh, what a gift to kids to get them into nature journaling early. Educators can help children see that outside isn't just a place for recess and playing sports. It's what actually sustains us. I don't think kids understand that green expanse out there, that's where food can be growing. That's where our oxygen comes from. Things like that, I don't think kids make the connection. As educators, we can recognize the gift to the human spirit of learning to be comfortable within the natural world, of acquiring a sense of place and a feeling of home, being at home in the natural world. And then this is something that frightened me. These two researchers did something. They said, we allude to a sensory narrowing during screen time, in that the visual and auditory senses are stimulated, whereas other sensory motor modalities may be neglected. For that is proprioception, active motor control, smell, taste, haptics, our sense of touch. But what frightened me, because I've experienced this with kids, is that this notion of proprioception, or one's awareness of one's body position and movement through space, so understanding the relationship between movement and location, kids are becoming unable to walk on uneven ground. It makes them nervous, they become clumsy, and it's because they're not used to just racing around outside as kids. I mean, what's the opposite of a gift? I mean, it's something we've stolen from kids, to just be comfortable outdoors. They're sitting on their backsides so much of every day that they're no longer comfortable being outside, even just walking on uneven ground. Okay. Now, this has been a big caveat that a lot of educators haven't heard. And David Sobel is an environmental education guru in the United States. And he says, no environmental tragedies before 4th grade or 9, 10 years old. And that's why this focus on the rest of nature, bonding and connecting with nature, is for the youngest of our learners, particularly. These kids don't have the agency to figure out yet how to solve these problems. And they need reassurance that the adults in their world, whether it's parents, teachers, or others, that we're doing everything we can to solve the problems. And I've found myself having to fib to children, to tell little lies to children who I had one little one, he was like 7 or 8 years old, and we were doing an environmental activity. We weren't talking about anything bad, but just stuff that he'd heard maybe at home. He burst into tears. He just was standing in the middle of the classroom, burst into tears. He says, "Oh, we're wrecking nature, aren't we?" And I'm like, think fast, Julie, think fast, because he doesn't have to know that. He doesn't have to be burdened with that. So I said, don't worry, sweetie. There are lots of adults in the world who are working on that problem. And this one says it all. All I'm saying is I wished for an endless summer vacation, and now the glaciers are melting. So that's happening to more and more kids, especially teenagers, but the younger ones are picking up on it as well. So the 9 to 11-year-olds, these are the really curious kids. And this is the perfect time to be teaching them how life works, how precious this planet is because of the way things work out, to create and to sustain life here. Baba Dioum, a Senegalese forestry engineer, is a famous conservationist. He says, and other people have said similar things, we will love and respect only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught or allowed to experience. Now, some young people who have the privilege of just spending time out in the natural world, they'll pick up on these things without being taught. But most of our students need to be taught the principles of how life works. So here's the no-brainer for this age group. The Earth doesn't yet play a big role in conventional education. And so that further disconnects our students from the natural world. But everyone needs to understand how life works. I mean, the people who, I've done some research on this. The sciencey people who are climate change deniers are physicists, geologists, especially geophysicists, because of who hires them. It's the fossil fuel corporations, and engineers. And I'm like, why? I mean, they're obviously intelligent people. So why are they the top climate change deniers? And I realize it's because by training, they are ecologically illiterate. So they are not studying how life works. They're studying the little bits and pieces, separate from the integration of life. I found that fascinating. Something else, once you learn this, it becomes a no-brainer, and that is that evolution and ecology and biodiversity and ecosystem services are a continuum. And to teach ecology in this way, to teach how life works in this way, here's a quote from a Montessori expert, serves as a superior way for students to make sense of the world. It offers a powerful integrating theme in education. And just, I just want to tuck in that PS there. I never learned the carbon cycle in school. I learned the water cycle, and that was it. So imagine my whole generation, if very few of us learn the carbon cycle in school, no wonder we're just like, emitting carbon left, right, and center. 50 billion tons of CO2 and other greenhouse gases we're emitting every year. So I think if we learned a little bit more about the short and long-term carbon cycles in school, perhaps we wouldn't be so profligate with our emissions. So here's just a kind of an image to show that continuum for understanding how life works on Earth. So Maria Montessori, she has 5 great stories for Montessori students. And the first of them is the great story of the evolution of life on Earth. I have a student who's wonderfully gifted, and he said to my husband recently, oh yes, I don't believe in it. This is a student who's discovered an exoplanet, I should just say. He's very gifted. He said, no, I don't believe in the Big Bang theory. I'm more the circle theory. I'm like, well, I can't argue with that. But there was still a beginning for life on Earth. And so then teaching ecological principles, and then the importance of biodiversity, and then vital ecosystem services. So I'm just going to walk you quickly through. I'm not going to read all this for you, but teaching ecological principles such as, energy flows. The sun is the source of energy for all life on Earth. Cycling of materials, how everything is made up of the same building materials, and we're breathing the air that Cleopatra used to breathe. Interrelationships, everything's related to every other living and non-living thing on Earth. And change, change is constant. And other ecological principles like diversity and community and adaptation, things like that. These are things that 11-year-olds should know before they become 12-year-olds. Scott Sampson is a fairly well-known science educator. And so he says, he's talking about the importance of learning the importance of biodiversity. So again, I don't think we would be in an extinction crisis if people understood the importance of biodiversity. And he says, as educators, we must demonstrate that the marvelous interwoven complexity that characterizes every ecosystem, ancient and modern, is the result of a co-evolutionary dance that has required millions upon millions of years. And he says, united in a single theme, evolution and ecology provide a powerful lens through which to view life's web, forming the foundation of an integrated and underutilized perspective on nature. I love that quote. It really, really backs up what I'm trying to explain about, the importance of teaching these things to kids. Kids can understand these things because they live it if they're living outside. If they're not living it outside, we can be the ones to take them outside. And then nature's gifts. Kids really grasp this notion that nature provides so many things to us. And Robert Costanza and his team call them ecosystem services. And they came up with this idea. I'm sure you all know this, because they were trying to give a monetary value to all these gifts that we receive from the natural world, so that the business world would understand what we're losing if we lose these ecosystem services. The one, when I taught an introduction to sustainable development to university students, the one that really hit home was in parts of China where they grow pears, a very famous place for growing pears. People are out there with little brushes, hand pollinating as many blossoms as they can, because their pesticides have killed off all the pollinators, all the pear tree pollinators. And where's pollination? It's on this list. Number 11 is pollination. These are trillions of dollars worth of gifts, that we receive from the natural world every year. So next we move on to the middle years students, the 12 to 15-year-olds. And these are the ones I mentioned, they're the ones who aren't playing on the playground anymore at the school. They're the ones standing around yakking, talking, with each other. And this age group, we need to put their passion, energy, and creativity to work because they're just so passionate. Jane Goodall of Roots and Shoots and Chimpanzees said, you cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. So what you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. If we say this, if we teach our middle school students this quote, I think it's going to change how they feel about school in their middle years. So the no-brainer here is that we and all future generations, we've got one heck of a problem, and students and teachers can help to solve it. And I really want them to see themselves as potential problem solvers for all the problems in the world today. Early teens love working together, and they have the passion and the agency for problem solving. At the very least, teachers can look for ways to incorporate a solutions-focused worldview into their course material. And they can and should be modeling and teaching ecological ethics throughout the grades. So these are students who competed in a competition. That's the other thing that starts to be really cool at this age group, is that they can, they can see themselves as winning a contest, so they'll work really hard for it. But they've discovered a problem in their school and then came up with a way to solve it that made recycling easier for their classmates and schoolmates. Then we move to the senior students. Whoops. Come back. There we go. So teachers, both teachers and graduating students, have to become aware of the increasing trends in global environmental degradation. So the middle school students are going to choose a problem, but they're not necessarily going to be learning the trend that everything is getting worse and worse and worse, faster and faster, as I'm sure you folks all know. But at this stage, we want to stay solutions focused, even for the senior grades and university level. So let's teach them about sustainable development. This is a real bugbear for me because there's a Canadian educator who wrote an article that was titled, "Why I Don't Want My Children Educated for Sustainable Development." And bless his heart, that man destroyed years of sustainable development education. Because people looked at it and went, oh, that sounds wise, and then they didn't teach for it or teach about it. I have found in my research that when we teach people the principles and processes of sustainable development, its history and its story, how it came to be through the Brundtland Commission, things like that, its potential and its promise, like it is a transformative new paradigm. I know it's several decades old now, but we haven't adopted it yet. That's what these senior grade students need to learn and to understand in order to graduate as sustainable development practitioners. That's what's going to create a change out in the world outside of school, especially in the business world, is a generation of students who go, wait, just a minute, where's the environmental concern in what you're talking about? What about the social equity aspects of what you're talking about in this business? So the no-brainer here is, if our schools and other educational institutions aren't teaching for sustainable development, and I mentioned this earlier, or as if we're not teaching for survivable or survival, no, it should be survivable. I've got that wrong. He called it survivable development. It's Dennis Meadows speaking at Club of Rome. Then by default, we're teaching for unsustainable and unsurvivable development. Okay, so we have to consciously and deliberately teach for sustainable development and survivable development. Sustainable development is the best ethical way of doing business like this, not business as usual. That is taking us down a deadly path. But it can be applied to all aspects of a school and graduates' lives and career as a discussion and planning framework for decision making on new actions and initiatives. So it gives them a how. This is what I teach my students at the university level. They know what all the whats are by that level. You know, they know that we have water issues, we have equity issues, poverty and food insecurity, and the SDGs, the life above water and life below water, and all these different, or life on land and life below water, sorry. They know all these things, but they do not know how to make a difference. So some grade 3 students that I've worked with, they grasp the principles of sustainable development faster than many adults because it's all about fairness when you think about it. So grade 3 students that I've worked with, they came up with these questions. Is it fair to nature? Is it fair to all the people involved? And is it a fair price for everyone? So that's environmental, social, and economic. There's the triple Venn diagram, or the three-legged stools. And then finally here, a better, more potentially transformative solution has not been found. But we are still not teaching our students about this. We're still not teaching them how to do this. There's more what, we're teaching them the what, more and more, better and better, but we still are not teaching them the how. So there's the list of the 11 sustainable development principles that I pulled from the Rio Declaration, other things that came out of the Rio Earth Summit, the integration principle. And I say to my students, that is the quintessential principle of sustainable development. Because if we're not integrating, then if we're still doing things in silos, the business people are over there, and here's the people who run the food banks who care about people and social issues, and then there's the greenies in the bushes over there. That's not sustainable. We're not going to come to sustainable development. So this number one principle is quintessential. But the multi-stakeholder roundtable, my students found that transformative to actually sit after being in a classroom, staring up at the teacher for how many years, 12, 13, 14 years. They were sitting in a circle finally. They were hearing from their classmates, and I was participating as well, and it was transformative for them. 2 principles on business, right? Ethics-based economics that respects the environment, full cost accounting, and the internalization of externalized costs. I have to talk a lot about that to my students so that they grasp things can be done differently in a business environment. Women, youth, and Indigenous people have a vital role to play. Peace, development, and environmental protection are interdependent and indivisible. Intergenerational equity, intragenerational equity. This really gets people thinking about the impacts of the choices they're making today, the actions they're taking today, and the decisions and actions that impact the future. And then the 3 PPs, pollution prevention, polluter pays, precautionary principle. If we teach those principles to our graduating students, then they go out into the world knowing how to do. It's a how, not just the what needs to be done. They have learned how to do it because they apply all of these different principles to any ideas, any brainstorming, any decisions that are about to be made. Some people, they'll say that we're teaching controversial issues. There is one biased belief that I believe all children and youth should be indoctrinated with, and it is that life is the most important thing we and all living beings have. If that's controversial or if that's biased, then so be it. I teach this biased belief to all children and youth that I work with. And I believe that they should be indoctrinated with this belief that everything we do should and must be in service to life and all living beings. So let's take a deep breath. I'm going to look at the time, and I can't remember when I started. 30. I have a little bit more. Shall I carry on, folks? What do you think? Ted, what do you think?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. It's not too much longer. I just have a few more things I want to share with you. So I talk about, and this is actually a presentation I made in South Africa years ago before I stopped flying. We've talked about ecological ethics that we're going to teach to the younger ones, early experiences in the natural world, life as great story, teaching that the continuum of evolution, ecology, etc. And I just talked to you about sustainable development, learning, and action. I just want to mention that there are a few other tools for transformation, and you can see these all written up on my website. So let me just walk through the last of these. Okay, so environmental math and ecological economics. Believe it or not, there are math textbooks that talk about Burger King burgers and Adidas running shoes. I mean, talk about turning children into consumers. So I did a workshop once, and the teachers gave me the lessons that they wanted examples, like how can we sort of ecologicalize these lesson plans. And one of them was grade 3 subitizing. And I was, oops, I think I retired too soon. I'd never heard of subitizing. So it's a term coined in 1949, but it means that you could just look at something and know the number. So there are 5 fingers on my hand, but you'll notice with younger kids that if we say to them, what is 5 plus 3? They'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They count their fingers every time. 6, 7, 8. They can't start at 5. So that's about grade 3, they start to recognize. But I said to this group, well, what about subitizing or teaching subitizing through patterns in nature? The 4 seasons, the 4 directions, or the 5s, the 5 arms of a sea star, the little star inside the apple if you cut it, a cross section of it, or the 6s of the honeycomb or the snowflake, things like that, versus Burger King and Adidas. Oh my gosh. Another transformative tool here is to teach ecologically inclusive scientific literacy. So there are several things that I see. I work a lot, not with deniers, that wouldn't be the right word, climate emergency deniers, and I interact a lot. Let's put it like that. And I find, first of all, they are ecologically illiterate. They don't understand how we are changing ecosystems. But they don't understand exponential growth. They don't understand weight of evidence. They don't understand shifting baselines. They certainly don't believe in the precautionary principle. So as we're teaching scientific literacy in our schools, we need to be teaching ecologically important aspects of scientific literacy. Environmental history. Brian Swim and Thomas Berry, they wrote, the historians, even when articulating world history, deal not with the whole world, but just with the human, as if the human were something separate from or an addendum to the story of the earth and the universe. What a shame, for students to not understand the history of climate change, for example. That's something else I find, is that climate emergency deniers are historically illiterate when it comes to the history of climate change. And so they're always throwing these fancy denier graphs on the screen, and they're totally irrelevant because they show that the world was warmer when there were no humans on Earth, and certainly when there was no agriculture on Earth. So if we taught some more environmental history instead of just kind of wars and stuff like that in our history classes and our social study classes, I think that people would care more about the world, about the earth. This one is near and dear to my heart. So even today, we use language like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. I mean, that's so nasty, right? It's violent. Or we use militaristic language, or we use mechanistic language, or we use anti-nature language, or language that's devoid of nature. Why can't we say something like feeding 2 birds from 1 hand, right? It's peace promoting. It's more respectful of the natural world. It's organic. The language and the metaphors that teachers use and that parents use, I have to add that in, that parents use around their kids. We create people who are going to be friends of nature, or we create people who are going to sort of ignore nature or be anti-nature. Let me show you another example. So you talking about our brain as a computer, which is mechanistic, or talking about brain as garden. You know, we're preparing the soil in a child's brain so that when we drop in the seeds of knowledge, the seeds of understanding, when we try to grow habits of mind and heart, the brain is ready. So isn't that a much more lovely metaphor to use to describe the brain? So to me, I often say to educators, this is number one. This is the first thing you can do, because you can start right now listening to the language and metaphors that come out of your mouth, and finding language and metaphors that are more organic and natural, that promote peace in the world and respect for not just the rest of nature, but also other people. Okay, language that isn't sexist, it isn't racist, etc. And I want to almost end with this one, and that is the most important curriculum right now in the midst of a climate emergency, and that is learning to grow food and build soil and collect rainwater in a changing climate. So everything that teachers do now to teach anything else, reading, writing, arithmetic, or up into the higher levels, you know, the chemistry, the biology at the higher levels, history, anything else, needs to be in service of learning how to grow food in a changing climate. Excuse me. Because as you folks, I'm sure you all know this, but a lot of kids don't know how food is grown. I work with students in garden education quite often, and little kids, if you give them some seeds, they'll go like this, and they just throw it on the soil. So they don't know how to sort of prepare the soil. They don't know about spacing and things like that. They don't really know yet that it's the sun and air and water and healthy soil and predictable weather and a stable climate that are important for agriculture and for our food security. I take a shaker of salt with me when I work with the little kids, because I say, hey, how many of you eat French fries? And they all put their hands up. I say, do you throw all the salt on one French fry, or do you sprinkle it all over all your French fries? And of course they sprinkle it. So I've taught them how to sprinkle the seeds, you know, the smaller seeds. And then we do a little game where we put you put the seed in, and then you put 2 fingers, and you put another seed, things like that. Simple things for the younger kids. But the older kids, they need to understand agriculture is a major cause of climate disruption. And they also need to understand that climate disruption and destabilization are adversely affecting our food growing. So agriculture allows human endeavors, other human endeavors lead to climate change, etc. So we must urgently teach food growing skills and habits of head, heart, and hands. We can't grow food overnight, and nor can we learn to grow food overnight. And a changing climate makes that even harder. I love this quote. Through one simple little act, we can cultivate a world that is more diverse, unified, and collaborative, and less divided and lonely. Ultimately, a world more joyous and sustainable than this one through one simple act, and that is gardening. And I will leave you there. There's my contact information. I would love to hear from you. I do this for all the children of all species for all time. If you don't know the work of William McDonough, please check it out. He's a green design guru. And he says, how do we design a world that is good for all the children of all species of all time? And that's who I dedicate this presentation to. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you very much, Julie. That was delightful. I got a couple of comments before I give this over to a few interesting questions we received. I grew up as a free-range kid in various parts of British Columbia. I was never very far from a tree or a stream, even going out with my other friends to dam some of the streams and probably doing damage, as well as stealing food and things like that from the people who lived around us. And that was considered part of growing up. So that was just a real reaction saying, God, we've lost a lot. That even my kids growing up in Ottawa, where at least we took them out a lot, but they certainly had not had the same kind of experiences. So that's one observation. My second observation is I'm trying to deal with the same issues with adults. I wander around the world trying to get people to actually take care of the communities within which they live, mainly the ones that are overstressed by growth or tourism. And have you any, I mean, we do get them together. We try and get them out on the land, out on the water, out actually dealing very specifically. And it seems to help. Have you any observations regarding how we can take your lessons to adults?
Interesting. When I started my master's study, what I wanted to do was because I looked around, even on a beautiful place like Pender Island, people didn't seem to be all that aware of ecological issues and environmental issues. And what I wanted to do was to create an environmental education workshop and take it to where adults go. So I wrote letters to the Chamber of Commerce, the Parent Advisory Council at the school, the Lions Club, anywhere that adults kind of hung out together. And I said, hey, I'd love to come and do this workshop. And the response was, why would our members care about that? So that I found fascinating. It was like, well, I don't know. We all live on this planet. But what happened is that an upcoming election in our small community created two very, very almost vicious camps. Like people were writing Nazi on other people's election posters. It was nasty. And I said to myself, this isn't right. I don't want to live in a community that treats each other like this. So it was those who believed that development was good for the economy versus those who believed that development was bad for the environment. And they were locked in a battle like this. And I organized a community forum on sustainable development. And Ted, one of the main things that I discovered going through that process is that learning about sustainable development enticed people to environmental learning and action. And it was an unexpected finding in my research. But that's one way to do it, because sustainable development is an adult thing, right? It's a grown-up sort of thing, right? That's what we're all supposed to be doing as adults now. And they came together, and we sort of, we had them at different round tables dealing with different themes. But in every case, we put our community at the center of their table. And that interest in their community is what got them thinking, not just about, the food bank and young people need more recreational activities, but also, oh my gosh, we need to be recycling better. We need to be dealing with invasive plants better, things like that. So it actually, it's fascinating you asked that, because I kind of forgotten that aspect of it, that learning about sustainable development actually entices adults to more environmental learning and action.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have the next question. I thought I had, there you are. Yes, Richard, you're next. And after that, we'll have Raymond Lurie.
Yeah, Julie, that was a great talk. And I wanted to, one of the things I wanted to ask is, it strikes me that Canadian Club of Rome, it's mostly made up of older people who have already been converted. They've already, become aware of the issues.
Yeah.
But we have for some time talked about getting the youth involved and getting them to be part of the Canadian Club of Rome, getting them involved in the sense of either being educated or them educating us. They may have solutions that we haven't thought of. But it's getting them involved at a younger age and getting people involved at a younger age. And I think that would give strength to the organization. And I'm just wondering if you've had any thoughts on that.
Well, I'll tell you what popped into my head was pizza. Because when I worked at Upper Canada College, we had a green school club, and we came together for a lunch and learn every Tuesday. And I don't remember where the money came from, but we served pizza. And they might have come for the pizza, but they learned and they love. Now, I was working with high school. Middle school, I think, is where it's at. The high school kids are getting more and more into the marks. They have to focus and things like that. But middle school kids are still at that point where they're, they still want to talk and, find solutions together. I would, if you were going to do something, for example, like go into schools or have a Saturday. How many of you are Rotarians? Do you think there's much overlap? I wonder. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the Rotary Club has Interact, which is for kind of for high school students. Rotaract is for college level. But they met Saturday. We met Saturday nights, and it was quick. Maybe an hour and a half. We'd have a guest speaker, or we'd come up with a project to do together. Now, something else that might, and tell me if I'm going on and on about this, but something else that might work is a contest, because Canadian middle year students don't have a lot of places to, a lot of opportunities to create a solution to a problem and then sort of show it and share it, to the world. But that would be cool, because then your members could be judges and promoters of it.
Sure.
Yeah, things like that. That would be cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. We're in the process of trying to figure out what our strategic plan is for the next 5 years. So that just made the list. Thank you.
Yeah.
Raymond, you're next.
Hi, Julie. Thanks a lot for the presentation. Very
Yeah.
interesting and very something that I'm quite concerned about is how people get educated and what they hear during their education. Now, I was a Rotarian for a bit of time, and I'm sure you're aware that the Rotary Club added I believe they call them pillars of what they do, and they've added another pillar that's the environment, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work happening there that's positive. Now, the first comment I made is I just essentially, I can't believe that people are actually driving their kids to school. To me, it's a very wasteful activity. So forget about the idling. People should be encouraged not to drive their people to school, their kids to school. When I was a kid, I would walk to get to the school bus, and everybody else at school that was close enough to the school would walk, and I envied those kids who could walk to school. And actually, my kids, when they went to school, we're actually within, by the crow flies distance, we're within 2 kilometers of the school. So my kids didn't get a school bus, but it turns out to get to the school, they had to walk outside of that circle and walk back in. So they actually walked 3 kilometers. And my response to that was, yes,
Great.
they'll get more exercise.
Right.
They'll breathe in some fresh air in the morning, right?
Yeah.
But there's this culture where we have to call our kids, and that includes driving them to school every day, which I think is ridiculous. But the other comment I made later is that I think there's a real issue with some people in industries that are, the bad industries, if you will. So the ones that contribute to greenhouse gases, the fossil fuel industry in particular, where for whatever reason, someone may have done their PhD in geology 30, 40, or 50 years ago, and they did it for whatever reason, because whatever it might be, but they didn't do it to wreck the world, right?
Yeah, true. It's true.
Right?
Yeah.
But they ended up in a...
I call it the unintended consequences of burning fossil fuels.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things there is that we, there's a tendency of a lot of people in those sectors to become defensive, and to think that we're blaming them for making bad choices. If you're trying to feed your family, you make the choices that you have in front of you, and sometimes the choices aren't optimal. So, and I think it's an important part of what we need to do is to figure out how to transition these people to other gainful employment that will allow them to keep their families fed, but will allow them to get into a sector that's more that's better for the planet, right?
Yeah. Now, when I moved from Ontario, where I was Burlington, Ontario, where didn't have much industry or anything happening there, I moved to Saskatoon for my first teaching job, and all of a sudden, it was all about resource industries. And I remember I had to it's like, what do I do with this? And I remember saying to my students, hey, kids, I'm not saying that, every tree has to be saved. But what I am saying is that not every tree needs to be cut down. And somewhere in there, there's room for finding out, learning about ecology, learning what's best, learning what's harmful, things like that. And the whole fossil fuel thing, the sad part, of course, is that it's been decades now that they've known, right? The fossil fuel industries have known since the 50s that they were heading down the wrong path, because their scientists told them that. But yeah, I hear you totally. And especially when you're talking to young people and their parents are working in the industries. You're exactly right. So there does, and that's kind of when parents will say, oh, you're teaching a controversial issue. Not controversial at all. The science is clear, right? Burning fossil fuels, cutting down forests, emits carbon or does not store carbon, respectively. So we do have to find ways to reassure kids and in a sense to reassure parents. Yeah, that we're not saying what they're doing is bad. We're saying it's something that has to change, and grow. But again,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that to kids who are younger than 12 years old and maybe even older. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess some of it has to do with making choices that are better, right? So if you
Yes.
could choose to heat your home with electricity versus gas, well, you should choose electricity, right?
Yeah.
So, right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So we're going to move next to Art, who has a comment and also has super experience of doing just that. He's virtually 100% off grid all the time. And then after that, we'll go to Jean Doherty.
Yeah, Julie, thank you for the presentation. Quite enjoyed that, and I certainly twigged off your term. Everybody should be as adults practicing sustainable development. Well, yeah, certainly, and you then start to take that apart and what does that really mean? And and I'll be quite open. I'm a scientist and I'm an engineer. And you took a little swing at scientists and engineers, and I just want to push back a little. One of the social constructs that I certainly grew up in was the social policies that says if you show any capabilities in math or science, you got applauded and encouraged, and they gave you bursaries and sent you off to university and poured money on you to go off and become a scientist. That's what happened to me. And I am a result of social policy. Now, this means I became quite adept in STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and it became very clear to me that mathematics itself was developed by man to try and understand nature. What's happening with the stars? Is the earth flat? What? Let's do some inquiry here. Let's go after this. And our history is full of inquisitive minds that have been encouraged by social policies at the time to go off and do those investigations and understand how is nature working? What's happening? We are part of this cycle. Should we not understand what's happening in the oceans, in the atmosphere? Should we not look at how agriculture actually works? Should we not go after investigating disease? Should we ignore all that? No, we're involved in the process of trying to understand and work with nature. And yes, there is consumption required. Even our indigenous people, they harvested the forest, they hunted to eat, and all of nature is in a cycle where there is sustainability amongst the species, and we practice that as well. And it doesn't mean we are all nasty fossil fuel engineers who are climate change deniers.
Yeah.
We are not.
No, don't get me wrong. I know that. Yeah.
And so I'm just pushing back a little bit.
Yeah.
And in fact, I would think that most of the scientists and engineers that you will run into are in fact very concerned that there are in fact a subset of people in our profession that are and some would say
Contrarian.
they're doing it to make money. They have to live too. Anyway,
Julie, do you want to respond to Art, or shall I get on to Jean?
Well,
She's on the same topic.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just say quickly that that I've actually researched this. Like it's a numbers thing. So I'm not saying that all physicists and all, engineers, et cetera, are deniers. What I'm saying is the loudest sciencey, I call them sciencey deniers, are in those fields. And I've just racked my brain trying to figure out why. And I think I think I don't know, it's just, there just seems to be an ecological illiteracy amongst the people. So I'm certainly not saying, Art, and please don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that most of people in your field are deniers. I'm saying that most of the deniers who come from a science background are physicists, geologists, and engineers. And it's just a numbers thing. I sort of keep track of who's denying out there.
I'm going to hand the response to this to Jean, because she is a geologist.
But okay,
and the one following her will be Samrat.
So just Jean, before you say anything, because I'm sorry if I made you feel defensive. I didn't mean to do that, but I do want us to keep in mind that it's an educational thing. So no engineer, no geologist, no physicist would be ecologically illiterate if we had taught ecology in elementary school, right? So let's keep that in mind as well. Anyway, go ahead, Jean, sorry.
Okay, I will state my background. Ted is correct, I am a geologist. I'm also an oil patch baby. My father was a geophysicist and I lived and grew up in Alberta. And I did my geology education at the University of Calgary. So I have had extensive understanding about what you're talking about. And also a lot of my classmates and much of my family are part of the oil industry. That's where our families go. So what I said in my comment is that most of the people while they're working keep quiet. They don't say anything because they are fearful of losing their jobs. That being said, the geological associations to which I have belonged all through my career are ones that are very fearful of the fact that we are being portrayed as the demons in this discussion. And every one of the organizations to which I belong came up with very strong statements about the fact that carbon dioxide and the work that we have been doing and that people have been burning have been causing the climate change. So I'm not going to belabor that anymore because I mean, it's just the way things are and you have to go with it. And also one other thing is that most of the people have to actually address the concerns to their children. Why are you working for this group? Why are you part of that organization? All right, that being said,
you can be a force for good within, within that industry, that profession, that organization.
And that brings me to what is, I'd like to ask this question. All through my career, I was trying to educate people about the importance of understanding the cycles of the world and how things happen, and also including the whole concept of geologic time and some of these things and all of the issues that go along with that. We encountered huge pushback from the education groups about trying to implement new programs of teaching so that people would understand some of the nuances. You're talking about something that's wonderful and it would be great, but it just doesn't seem to work very well. And I will say on a personal level that my children, my grandchildren in schools are not receptive to listening to anything that I have to say. And my children certainly weren't receptive when they were in their teens. Their friends were, but they were not. So how do you get this kind of an education paradigm shift in? Because there has been work done for years that hasn't worked.
Yeah. Interesting, Jean. Thanks for talking to me about this. I just want to quickly go back, and if you have a moment and you feel like doing this, could you send me links to the kind of the statements that you've been talking about? Because what I would love to do, I work with deniers all the time. Like, I'm always interacting with them. So I would love to be able to say, you're a geologist who denies that we're in a climate emergency. Here. I'd love to be able to just link. Yeah, so that'd be great. What you've talked about, there's two things I think I'll mention. One is, I'm trying to remember when I graduated as a teacher. I think it was 85 or something like that. Almost from that moment, a refrain has been, we're already got so much on our plates.
Yep.
It's so busy. People and the curriculum just keeps getting fatter and fatter and fatter, and we're expected to teach more and more with less and less time. So that's sort of the reality, right? And that's why with my curriculum map, what I'm trying to say is, you don't have to change what you teach. Just shift the paradigm. Just know that you're teaching it in service to the earth, so and the future, right? So that whatever you're teaching, just kind of give it a little bit more thought and think, would those be good examples? Would those be nature connecting examples or sustainability examples, for example? Or when I'm teaching this particular thing, can I use like teaching, right? Teaching about metaphor, teaching about the power of language, things like that. So it really is just teach what you're teaching, but keep the grade level or the developmental level focus in mind. So the things that you're talking about, my sense is that right now, oh my gosh, even just, Jean, I hate to say this, 2017, I believe, I had to quit, sort of in disgust, which makes me sad, the BC Teachers Federation Committee for Action on Social Justice, Environmental Justice Action Group, because our action group spent like blood, sweat, and tears creating a climate change, we called it a climate justice, actually, workshop for teachers. It was for teachers. And they never even told us the reason why. They hired a denier to revamp it. And I'm like, I'm out of here. But I think nowadays they would be more and more open to, oh my gosh, let's get some experts in here to talk to us. Like, they would love someone now, Jean, like you, to be meeting with the sort of group that I was in, to be developing that kind of workshop. I think we were just before our time, frankly. Now, the sad part of that is we're running out of time. Most people don't understand. This isn't like civil rights or the women's movement, where women aren't going away and nor are minorities going away. No, we can work at it until we get there. We're running out of time just because of inertia in the system and feedbacks and tipping points, et cetera, that most people don't understand.
Yeah, Julie, you're right. We're not only that, we're running out of time here too. I have two last questions.
Okay.
Good. It's really excellent timing. I have Mike Nickerson and
Okay.
a final question from John Legg, and then we'll try and wrap it up, and then we can
Okay.
sit around and talk with each other on anything else we wish.
Okay, so Jean, just talk to your local teachers association,
Yeah.
even local, and yeah.
I have done all of that. I will just say this, all through my career.
Yeah.
We were working on a lot of different things, working with the Ontario Teachers Association, the Alberta Teachers Association, trying to get into the schools. The one stumbling block that I really realized that was a major issue is the fact that the vast majority of teachers in the elementary grades, basically from grades kindergarten through to grade 6, are women who are afraid of science and do not have the background or the understanding to teach the kind of cyclical and integrated project that you're talking about.
I hear you.
So it's very difficult. So teach the teachers is what we were trying to do for a long time with very, very modest success.
Yeah.
So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I
Just
hear
one
you.
comment before we quit. But we have more time later. Jean can tell us about her experience trying to teach geology to people who didn't believe in evolution, and were and she was tasked specifically to do it that way. Anyway, Mike, on to you.
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted. Would you unmute yourself, please, Mike?
There we go. So
Okay,
thank
thank
you for all these details about how to work with younger people. I have notes of people I know that work with young people to get them to watch the recording of this. The work I do is trying to pinpoint what the paradigm shift is that we have to go through, and it relates to what's been said about dealing with older people as compared to younger people. Older people haven't been bad because what it's meant to be good humans was to earn and spend as much money as possible. That's the essence of the growth economy. And people have been doing that as good, humans. And now all of a sudden, what we need to do is live as lightly as possible with as little material disruption, get as much satisfaction from living as we can, and to manage the material world in a way that'll serve the children and the grandchildren. We've boiled this paradigm shift down to more fun, less stuff.
Yes,
It's concise and it's easily communicated, and it seems to stick in people's brains.
yeah.
But recently, listening to some people who've studied, trying to get sustainability to older people, they said that scares them. That makes them feel guilty. And I can understand that. And you mentioned Alec McDonough, and one of the quotes from him that I remember is that negligence begins today, now that you know. And that's after you've had a chance to somehow clarify what ecological systems are. Because I see people, going through the regular motions of making the economy grow, doing good things in that perspective.
Yeah.
And they just do not know what you're saying they should learn in elementary school. And I agree entirely. And I've known people who've worked on that in Ontario, got it to the point where it was through K to 12, and then it all got wiped out by an incoming conservative government. So it's an uphill battle, but we try to promote this more fun, less stuff, and just push it that bit further, because the stakes are clearly higher now, and people are starting to pay attention, we'd like to think. I don't know if you've got comments on that.
Wow. Yeah, for many years, I did workshops on voluntary simplicity. But it's a certain type of person who can buck the trend. I mean, it's a powerful force, the business as usual, citizens as consumers. I mean, even just the history of, how we've been turned into consumers. It's fascinating. And if you teach people that, then they can go, oh, it's not my fault. I don't have to feel guilty. It was done to me, kind of thing. But at this point, Mike, to be honest, I'm not sure we have time to deal with it. Can I say average Joes? And I just want to say that term. We need to be getting our governments to stop subsidizing fossil fuels, so that fossil fuels will be so uneconomic that people won't buy them anymore. We have to, I think now, I still talk about greening the heart of education, because kids still deserve a childhood. They deserve a green childhood. And so on the one hand, I say to myself, what's the point? On the other hand, I say, well, kids still deserve a childhood. And people who, when I work with deniers in social media, I'm also dealing with what they call the doomers. And I always say, hey, listen, let's just stay clear here on who the doomers are. The doomers are the ones who are dooming us, not the people who recognize that we might be doomed. Okay, let's stay clear there. But
so Julie, do we have time to be deprogrammed, or is it more urgent?
No, I don't think we do. To be honest, I don't think we do. I think that we owe the kids to go down swinging, so that they know some of us cared enough to keep working on their behalf. But I think we need to be hammering hard on politicians, hammering hard on like the education field, hammering hard on especially extractive business and industry, hammering hard on listen to me, all pacifist here, hammering hard on the banks, for example, the investment banks. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think, like, I hear you, Mike, and continue. You've done fabulous work. You folks have done fabulous work over the years. So carry on that work. And can the rest of us please be hammering away at getting rid of fossil fuel subsidies? Like, imagine, like, just doing that. It'd be so fabulous.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give the last question to John Legg, and then we'll wrap it up, and we can all go off and save the environment actively. John, are you there? Is John there? He's not. He may have. There he is. Okay, you're on. Good.
Okay.
You got the last run.
At least I'm unmuted. What I look like doesn't really matter much, but if someone could put me on. Anyway, so Julie, this is not, the question is not to make you feel guilty, but, and maybe I missed this, because your answer would probably, here we are, would probably apply to the older years, because it's a question of a little bit more difficulty, and that is limits to growth. Mm-hmm. That is the theme of the Club of Rome, and therefore the Canadian Association. Now, and it follows right on from Mike Nickerson's, which was consuming, consuming, consuming. Well, is it, perhaps I should put my question a little bit more diplomatically than I did on the page, and that is, do you think that this is too difficult a question? That is to say, we have a non-growing planet, and yet we continue to grow our demands on the planet. Yep. Sorry to use that verb as a, anyway, you know what I mean. To grow. In French, and I've never found it exactly why, the translation of limits to growth was halt to growth, out à la croissance, which is more direct. And perhaps we should be hammering that. Mm-hmm. But here we are with a diminishing planet, and we have, we were 1.5 billion in 1900, and we were 6 billion 100 years later. And we've gone up there, from there to 8 billion. Well, is it too much to introduce to even students of an older age that concept? We have to stop growing our demands on this planet. Yeah. And yet somehow we're not making any progress whatsoever. Because why? Because everyone seems to be in favor of growth. Growth is good. Anyway, you can sense the frustration I have. Yeah. So there's the question. Yeah. So, is it too much to expect of even the older children to introduce that and hammer on it?
I think that that sort of concept could be started with the, that 9 to 11 age group where they're learning about ecological principles. There's no reason why that couldn't be part of what they're learning there. And thank you. I will include that. For the older kids, it's something that I teach is the difference between needs and wants. And of course, the whole advertising industry is about convincing people that their wants are needs. So media literacy becomes an important part of what kids need to learn as well, so that they can learn to judge the difference between what they actually need. Most people don't understand. If you say to people, what do human beings need? They don't know. They don't understand that, 3 minutes without oxygen, you could die. 3 days, 4 days without water, you could die. They don't get that. They don't know that the sun is the source of energy for life on Earth. So I don't know, Ted, you were talking about how do we bring adults to this?
Mhm.
Maybe, you know, those heritage moments on Canadian television, maybe we need to start doing ecological moments. So we're planting the seed, and we can use things like limits to growth would be, you know, and then Mike, more fun, less stuff would be the sort of solution to it, right?
We
And
we could easily drag the Royal Canadian Geographical Society and the CBC in on that concept. So once
Yeah,
again, we've
yeah.
just added another good idea to the list.
Yeah, yeah. No, John, you're completely correct. There's no reason why 3 different levels of the 4 I talked about couldn't be learning again in age appropriate ways, like the graph, you know, the limits to growth and all the graphs and everything. Wow, that'd be powerful. And you know, like a grade 10 math, a grade 10 science class, that would be fabulous, right? Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to add it to my website.
Right.
So thank you. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Julie. I think we can now give you the formal thanks, because I think everybody who wanted to ask a question, we rammed them in somewhere. As a kid, I first ran into the concept of limits to growth when we grew fruit flies in a bottle, and we watched them die. And that was the very first conceptual explanation that there were limits. And they hadn't even invented the term yet, but the concept was there. And the same way where the farmer next door discovered to his chagrin that he could only put 80 sheep in that field, and other than that, 20 died. So it was a little more obvious and a little more visible. Can we teach people that now? Well, we can do that over TV. We can watch millions of people die every day due to the same thing, but they just don't look at it that way.
Yeah.
So that said, thank you very much for this presentation and stimulating our interesting questions and our thoughts about how we might, again, try to really solve the problem. So thank you again for coming. An excellent presentation. It will be put on YouTube very shortly. And this is the commercial. Those of you who are not members, please join. Those of you who do watch or share it on YouTube, ask people to subscribe, because that helps us get more of it out to other people, and please share it. So thank you again, and we are now welcome to turn off or turn on our microphones and video.